I was 6 months into believing the lie, when I finally realized the house was never meant to be mine. I found the Reddit post at 2:17 a.m., the one I wrote half a year earlier. Husband says I can't be added to the deed of the house. Back then, I framed it like a simple paperwork problem. A technical detail. A misunderstanding. I didn't know it was the start of discovering the truth about my life. At the time, my husband had a ready answer for everything. He'd bought the house before our marriage, that part was true. But when I asked to be added to the deed after we married, the excuses came quick and steady. It's complicated. The bank made it harder than you think. There's no rush. We're married, it's basically yours anyway. I believed him. For 6 months, I kept asking. Over dinners. After bills were paid. Late at night, when the house was quiet and the walls felt heavy with things left unsaid. And every time, the story shifted. First it was, we'll look into it after refinancing. Then, there's taxes involved. It could mess everything up. Then finally, it wouldn't matter if your name's on it anyway. Arizona's a community property state. If something happened to me, it's yours regardless. That was the line that froze me. Because I remembered my own words from that old post. The house was bought before the marriage. Which meant, legally, it was his asset, not ours. I asked him straight out. So if it doesn't matter, why not just add me? The room went quiet. No explanation. No reassurance. Just deflection. That was when the feeling I couldn't name finally sharpened into clarity. He wasn't confused. He wasn't procrastinating. He was protecting something from me. I started digging quietly. Phone in hand. Late-night legal searches. Reading Arizona property statutes like I was studying a foreign language I suddenly needed to survive. That's when everything clicked. Community property doesn't magically claim what was owned before marriage. If your name isn't on the deed, you don't own the house. Not really. And the loan. The crushing part. He couldn't afford it on his own. Every month I paid toward a mortgage. On a home legally not connected to me at all. Not the equity. Not the title. Not a single official piece of it. I was funding something that could be taken from me with one signature. With one filing. With one moment of betrayal. When I confronted him with the research, he didn't argue. He didn't correct me. He just shrugged. That shrug said everything. I realized I wasn't married to a partner. I was married to someone who planned for a future where I wasn't protected in it. That night, I sat alone in the living room, the very space I had helped pay for, decorate, maintain, and saw it differently for the first time. It wasn't home. It was leverage. A fortress built in his name. With my money reinforcing the walls. The next morning, I stopped asking to be added to the deed. Instead, I started asking the real question. Could I assume the loan? Because the truth was simple. He couldn't keep the house without me. The finances told that story clearly. But whether a bank would allow assumption without being a title holder, that was the unknown. Still, I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of answers. Not of outcomes. Not even of walking away from a place I once believed was mine. For 6 months, I thought I was begging for fairness. Now I understood. I was gathering evidence. And as the legal papers stacked higher beside me, one thing became painfully clear. Some people don't steal your money. They steal your security. Slowly. Quietly. Legally. And they hope you never notice the trap. Until the door is already locked behind you. But I did notice. Just in time. I didn't lose a house. I uncovered the truth. And sometimes, that's the most powerful escape of all. The first call I made wasn't to my husband. It was to a lawyer. I sat in my car in the parking lot of a grocery store, phone pressed to my ear, trying to keep my voice steady while explaining how I had paid thousands into a mortgage without a single legal claim to the house. There was silence on the line. Then the attorney said the words that cut deeper than anything my husband had ever told me. "You're not protected here." Arizona law was clear. Because the home was purchased before the marriage and never retitled. It wasn't community property. It was his. Every payment I'd made. Simply considered household contribution. No equity. No ownership. No safety net. I drove home in a haze of fury and clarity. That night, I confronted him, not with emotion, but with documents. Highlighted statutes. Printouts from the county recorder. Legal explanations I barely understood but studied anyway. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I slid the papers across the table. "You lied," I said quietly. He didn't deny it. Instead, he leaned back, crossed his arms, and smirked. "I told you it wouldn't matter." That smirk told me everything I hadn't wanted to believe. He always knew exactly what he was doing. When I told him I'd spoken to an attorney, the balance shifted. The confidence drained from his face. Because now there were two truths he had to face. One, he couldn't afford the house without me. Two, I finally understood exactly what that meant. I stopped paying the mortgage the next month. Not out of revenge, but survival. And suddenly, the panic began. Calls from him replaced his indifference. "What are you doing? You can't just stop paying. You're hurting us." I didn't argue. I repeated what he told me for months. "It's not your house anyway." Within 3 weeks, he floated a desperate compromise. "If I add you to the deed now." But it was too late. I had learned the rules of the game he started, and now I was playing by them. Being added to the deed carried risks. Debt exposure, tax consequences, and zero guarantee of protection. The lawyer warned me. It's a trap unless there's formal documentation of your financial contribution and rights. So instead, I aimed higher. Loan assumption. If the mortgage could be assumed into my name alone, ownership could legally follow. It meant I wouldn't just gain protection. I'd control the entire asset. And that terrified him. He tried intimidation next. Threatened divorce. Hinted he'd sell the house out from under me. Promised long legal battles meant to exhaust me into submission. But I no longer flinched. I had learned something essential. People who rely on deception collapse when confronted with process. So I gathered everything. Payment records, text messages, financial statements, proof that I had sustained the house he claimed as his. Every receipt became a weapon. Every bank transfer a chess move. And soon, I wasn't asking what could be done. I was preparing for war. Because the next step wouldn't be done quietly. It would happen in court. He thought he controlled the house. He thought paperwork protected him. But paperwork cuts both ways. And as I walked out of the attorney's office with a legal filing packet gripped in my hands, one thought burned brighter than anything else. This wasn't about property anymore. This was about taking back power from someone who thought I'd never fight for it. The courtroom smelled like old paper and static tension. I took my seat at the narrow wooden table, hands folded neatly in front of me, while my heart hammered loud enough to drown out the shuffle of paperwork around the room. Across the aisle, he sat comfortably, too comfortably. Back straight, arms relaxed. Like someone who fully believed he had already won. In front of him lay the single piece of evidence he thought would save him. The deed, his name alone. He wouldn't look at me. He didn't need to. For months, the house had been his invisible shield. The thing he hid behind. The proof he pointed to whenever I questioned truth. Now he had it printed like a trophy. But he never read past the cover. The judge entered. The room stood, and something inside me finally settled. This wasn't about fear anymore. It was about exposure. My attorney began with the simple version everyone could follow. This case isn't about ownership documents alone. It's about financial reliance, deception, and economic exploitation inside a marriage. Exploitation. The word rippled across the courtroom. Then the evidence came out. Bank statements, direct deposits, mortgage payments drawn from my personal account, utility bills in my name, written texts from him acknowledging I paid our mortgage. Every document stacked higher and heavier than the single deed clutched in his hand. Every page said the same thing. I wasn't a passenger in that house. I was carrying it. When he was called to the stand, the confidence drained from his face. The questions came slow and clean. You told your wife the house was community property. Yes. You knew that wasn't legally true. Long pause. Yes. You accepted her monthly payments, knowing her name wasn't on the deed. Another pause. Yes. The courtroom felt like it was holding its breath. Then the question that shattered him. Did you ever intend to put her on the deed? He hesitated too long. His lawyer objected late. The judge overruled. He finally whispered. No. It was barely audible, but it echoed. In that moment, something ruptured inside him. The mask cracked. Months of manipulation fell away like brittle glass. I watched the color leave his face, while realization hit him harder than any accusation ever could. He hadn't been exposed as careless. He had been exposed as deliberate. His narrative collapsed. The judge leaned forward. Mister, you knowingly misrepresented marital property rights for financial benefit. This court considers that economic abuse. Abuse. The room went very still. Then came the ruling. Temporary injunction on sale and refinance. Immediate financial accounting review. Pathway established for forced loan assumption or equitable settlement. Meaning eventually, I'd either assume the mortgage into my own name and claim full ownership, or be awarded a financial settlement reflecting the full equity I had paid into. And he would have to answer for all of it. No more smirks. No more hiding behind paperwork. No more control. But the implosion didn't stop there. Outside the courtroom, he approached me for the first time in months, the bravado gone. You embarrassed me. That's what he said. Not I'm sorry. Not I lied. Not I hurt you. Just, you embarrassed me. I met his eyes without blinking. No, I replied quietly. You embarrassed yourself. I just stopped covering for you. And for the first time since the marriage began. He had nothing left to say. He walked away smaller than I'd ever seen him. Not defeated by the court, but undone by revelation. Because his greatest strategy was secrecy. And once the truth surfaced, he had no power left at all. Silence lives differently when the war is over. In the weeks after the ruling, the house felt vast and empty, not because of the space, but because the tension that had filled it for years was finally gone. Court orders rearranged our life faster than any emotional reckoning ever could. His access to accounts suspended. Forced financial review initiated. The loan assumption offered to me directly. I watched the paperwork arrive like the final chapter of a book I never meant to write. But the emotional weight came later. In the quiet evenings, when the urgency faded, the truth settled in. I had survived a marriage I didn't realize was built to consume me. Recovery was not glamorous. It was mundane. Cleaning out drawers full of documents that meant nothing now. Canceling auto payments I no longer owed. Switching the utilities fully into my name, small tasks, but powerful victories. Every click, every signature, felt like reclaiming a single stolen breath. The loan assumption process stretched for months, but the outcome was clear. I qualified a loan. No cosigner. No dependency. No lingering leverage for someone who had weaponized paperwork against me. The first day I walked past the house mailbox and saw my name printed beside the address alone. I cried. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly, with relief stitched into every tear. Still, emotional closure came slower. I replayed scenes I couldn't change. The dinners where I trusted lies. The nights I blamed myself for confusion someone had engineered. The months I believed love meant compliance. But then clarity arrived. I hadn't been foolish. I had been deceived. There's a difference. And the moment you recognize it, the shame dissolves. I didn't leave the marriage with bitterness. I left with armor. Because betrayal teaches lessons comfort never could. That protection isn't paranoia, it's autonomy. That preparedness is not pessimism, it's power. And that love without transparency isn't love at all, it's control. I moved through the house now, with unburdened footsteps. Walls I once felt small beside seemed taller. Windows let in more light. Nothing had changed physically. Yet everything was different. Freedom does that. One afternoon, long after silence replaced court dates, my phone buzzed. His name appeared. First contact since the ruling. I didn't answer. I never did. Some conversations don't create closure. They destroy it. And I had already finished the chapter I needed. The story didn't end with revenge. It ended with reclamation. With self-trust reconstructed from the rubble of manipulation. With peace born from knowing. I won something better than property. I reclaimed myself. They say survival stories end when danger disappears. But the real ending begins when a woman learns. She no longer needs to survive, only to live.